best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream, live reading. My name is Nick. I'm the creator of Hayes Reviews, and tonight we're going to be continuing our reading of Zbigniew Brzezinski's 1970 book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Now, we've been having some problem in this series of live streams. There have been technical glitches and hiccups, and there may be some tonight. And if there is, I'm definitely getting to the point where I'm blaming this evil sigil that's on the front of the book here, because I have been troubleshooting. I've been talking to Odyssey help people. I've been talking to an IT guy who volunteered his time and attention. And I've been tweaking things and making changes, and I think I've done about everything I can from this side. So if it keeps happening and we keep having problems, I'm actually going to start thinking that it is either deliberate interference, demonic interference, or just something that I haven't yet quite figured out with the setup of my laptop. But it is strange that all the many hundreds of hours that we've live streamed on this channel using this exact setup, nothing's changed about my setup. It's been the same since I began this streaming journey, since I began the channel, which was nearly certainly over 2 years ago. We're coming up on 3 years now. I started it quite a while back. My setup hasn't changed. I've just added a book cam, and I got a better webcam, and I got a better mic, but nothing's changed. We did move house. We did get a better internet provider. That's fixed. I do speed tests regularly, and the speeds are always good. So if there is interference and if things are going wrong and you can't hear me and the sound is bad and it's stuttering and all that nonsense, I apologize. But I am recording it on my side to my laptop, and I can upload the recording afterwards. I'm pretty sure I've fixed the recording problem, so I should get a flawless recording, and I will upload that in place of the crap live stream if it so happens that we have problems and it's unwatchable and we all have to bail out and go and do something else with our Friday evening. I won't be doing anything with my Friday evening. I'll be continuing and just making the recording and uploading that after the fact. But it's lovely to have you here if you're tuning in live. We have got LJ, General Meow Meow, Tammy, Frank on YouTube. Celine Lyons there as well. Good evening to you all. Thank you for hanging out. We've got ESP as well on Odyssey, who is telling me that this is outside interference. Odyssey, if you go to the Odyssey stream, it's still on the waiting page. Oh, no, it's caught up a little bit. It's showing me now, talking into my microphone. That's good. But something weird is going on, and I've done about all I can. Frank says, sound and picture good at the moment, so we'll see. Welcome. As I said, it's lovely to have you here. If you're watching the replay, I forgot to mention this last week, but there will be a pinned comment below the video. You can use that to navigate ahead to the book reading or to a specific section that you think sounds appealing. Tonight, we're going to be starting a new part of the book. There's 5 parts in this book. We're going to be starting part 3. And I haven't prepared much of a preamble ramble. I haven't prepared any preamble ramble. In fact, we're going to just dive right into the book, start reading it, and see how far we get, because this is the slowest progress we've ever made on a book. After 8 parts, we're not even halfway. Not even halfway after 8 parts. So we need to pick up the pace, as I keep saying. And we're going to be talking about something tonight that we've already done quite a bit of work covering on the channel before. And the topic is going to be communism. So the title of part 3 is Communism, the Problem of Relevance. I'm quite interested to see what he says and believes and writes about communism, because Brzezinski was kind of an expert in communistic systems. He did his sort of undergrad and graduate theses, master's dissertations type academic work on communism. So it's going to be good to see what he writes about in this section. Now, I say that we've talked about this topic before on the channel because those of you who've been hanging around for longer will remember perhaps that we did the book Fabian Freeway by Rose L. Martin, which is an excellent book. It's very long, detailed, very dense, very packed with data. But learning about the story, the history of the Fabian society, we find that communism is a system that has not gone away. It's morphed. It's kind of still with us. We're still being haunted by it. There are still people today who walk around calling themselves communists. And I have often remarked that it's absolutely fine to wear a hammer and sickle on your shirt or a badge or your lapel and tell people you're a communist, even though that ideology killed millions upon millions of people. But it's still fine to go around and call yourself a communist. And there's still meetings. There's Marxist meetings here in the city where I live, for example. Students as well are being sort of indoctrinated into this way of thinking and this ideology. I just got a message from LJ saying the picture is fine, but the sound keeps cutting out. So now we're having audio issues. It's just one thing after another, isn't it? Is the sound cutting out for everybody? Please let me know in the chat. Or is it just you, LJ? Please let me know. But in the book Fabian Freeway, what we discovered is that communism and socialism are actually the same thing. It's just that one sort of happens before the other. And in that book, in the studies and the preamble rambles and the research that we did, sort of fleshing out the context and learning about those ideas and people and groups and movements, we learned that socialism is actually the process of moving from a sort of capitalist free market trade-based system where you can own things privately and you can build a business and you can create products and you can sell and trade, transforming that system into a communistic system. Socialism is the sort of in-between phase of doing that. And as we know, the Fabian socialists were the incrementalists. They wanted to do things slowly, step by step, from within, infiltration and permeation and penetration of organizations and groups, focusing largely on the student bodies, as actually Zbigniew talks about in the previous chapter, the previous part. He was saying that student groups are great because they can be whipped up into a frenzy. They can be they can be turned against their elders. They can be turned on the system, which has raised them, that they've been born into. They have this desire to figure out who they are and to do something important and meaningful. And often they have a sense of moral indignation and they want to do something that is ethical. And so they can be led down the path of protest. And they can be led down this path not knowing that the protest is planned, that it is scripted, and that it is actually serving the elite's plan, because the systems that we get are never permanent systems, although maybe we'll get a permanent system very soon. But so far, every system we've been given, and I would say, in my opinion, this goes for every country across the world, the systems are always temporary because you have to do things step by step. Incrementalism, Celine Lyon says, the long march through the institutions. So if you're doing things step by step and incrementally, it's not, you don't go from A to Z immediately, right? You have to do all the letters in between. And so depending on the country and the culture and the way people think and the economy and the income level and the level standard of living and their beliefs and their religiosity and their spirituality or lack thereof and their education level, all these things, you're going to have to tailor the system to where they're at and plan the next step for them to nudge them along. So, and this is the way you do it. You get the young people, you get the students, you whip them up, you say, isn't this unfair? Look at all this injustice. Don't you think things could be better? You should protest, you should fight, you should stand in the streets and wave your signs that we printed for you, and, you know, throw those bricks that we delivered and dropped off at the side of the street at those small businesses over there, because we represent the big businesses and we want to leave those intact. So it's kind of, it's the transformation with an end goal in mind. That's what socialism is, and it's taking us towards a communistic system, or perhaps not a purely communistic system, but a sort of merging of the communist system with the Western free market capitalist system. That's what was revealed as the purpose of the large foundations in the Foundations, Their Power and Influence book. Because yes, as Tammy says, they are moving very fast now. I agree. The changes are coming thick and fast. It's almost every day. There's a new psyop, there's a new false flag, there's a new outrageous event that you have to analyze and focus all your time and effort on, and listen to all your favorite talking heads to get their hot take and their descriptions and understanding and interpretations of the events that are going on around you. And it's hard to keep up with it all. It's exhausting. That's why I stopped trying to keep up with any of it, pretty much. I have pretty well unplugged now from all the sources and talking heads that I used to listen to and that I've mentioned many times on the channel. I've often referred to Jay Dyer, Richard Grove, James Corbett, Last American Vagabond. I dip in here and there from time to time, but I'm certainly not trying to keep up, because it's impossible and you will lose your mind trying to do that, I think. One fella who was introduced to me fairly recently, and by recently I mean yesterday, it goes by the name of Clive Menzies. And he did a couple of videos that are up on YouTube. I put it into my Telegram chat. And these two talks by Clive, I think, were pretty darn good. And I listened to most of them. I did sort of fall asleep during one of them, because sometimes I like to listen to things at nighttime and I don't get all the detail because I get sleepy. Because, sometimes you got to sleep, recharge the batteries and all that. But if you go over to YouTube, you can have a look at this Economy 2.0, a conversation with Clive Menzies, which I thought was an excellent talk. That's not Clive there, that's Clive on the right. And he lays out a really compelling thesis, you might say, that he's arrived at through doing what he calls, what does he call it again? It's like collaborative co-learning, or something like that. I forget what it's called. I was hoping it would be in the chat down here. He had a project called the Critical Thinking Project, and him and a group of researchers were coming together, meeting every week, and they were trying to answer this question: who rules, how, and why? And the conclusion that he came to is that all the problems, all the things that we're seeing in the world, all the challenges, all the craziness can be tied to three main root causes, which are usury, institutionalized authority, institutionalized hierarchy, and theft of the commons. And the reason I mention this, and the reason I think it ties into what we're talking about tonight, is that third one. Well, kind of maybe all of them, but definitely the second and the third. The institutionalized hierarchy, because in a communistic system, even though they tell you it's for the workers and it's going to liberate everybody and we're going to have this utopia and this paradise, what you end up with is a tiny minority of technocratic, bureaucratic psychopaths managing and manipulating everybody else. And they're living the life of Riley. They get the luxurious perks of the job, the expense accounts, the nice meals and all that stuff. Meanwhile, they're just slaughtering tens, thousands, millions of people because of their policies and their demands. Nobody's allowed to say no to them. Nobody can question them or give them bad news, because you get taken out behind the shed and, shot. So there's that hierarchy that becomes institutionalized and you can't question it. And there's just this authority, people with power, and there's nothing that people below them can really do. But then there's theft of the commons, because the theft of the commons is, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure I understand the theft of the commons quite as well. But I'm thinking of it in terms of the abolition of private property. But Clive's in his talk, he's talking about the commons as like land in general, all belonging to a very tiny minority. But he talks about not just land, it's natural resources, it's things that you need to survive. It's water, okay? It belongs to water companies and you have to buy water from them. And the radio spectrum, the radio frequency spectrum is dominated by corporations. And you don't get to, in most cases, set up your own broadcast network or have your own little slice of the airwaves that you can broadcast on and that are yours, right? You have to use other people's, and that gets taken over by a small clique, powerful, dominant minority. And so communism kind of leads to all those things. In communism, they tell you that the stuff belongs to everybody, but does it actually in reality, when they're telling the farmers that they have to produce a certain amount of food and they ship it into the city so that you can allow the people in the city to carry on living and not producing anything? And so interesting stuff. I would recommend Clive Menzies' talk here with Henry George School of Social Sciences. And I would also recommend this other talk of Clive's, which is How Money Rules. And this is actually a Q&A. So the first half is a talk and the second part is a Q&A. And it touches on some of the same topics. Here, this was a great section where he talks about how he and his friends had a community event and they made 3 carrot cakes and they were talking to people who weren't so interested in these kinds of topics. And they brought those carrot cakes there as a sort of icebreaker to get the conversation flowing about these core causal factors in the world's problems as they saw them. So what I like about Clive and the things he's saying is he's in the real world talking to people, trying to affect hearts and minds on the ground in a very meaningful way, at least in this example of sharing the carrot cake, right? And he's got some slides, and it's a pretty interesting, comprehensive view of the way things work. And he refers to quite a few books here as well. He talks about Ed Griffin's book, Creature from Jekyll Island. He also talks about Stephen Mitford Goodson's book, somewhere around here, and Princes of the Yen, the book and documentary. Stephen Mitford Goodson's book, he does mention it, but maybe there's no picture for that bit. But that's a great book. It's hard to find. I think it's banned on Amazon now. It was A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, or the Enslavement of Everyone, something like that. I've got it up there. I can grab it. I'll show you. I found this one by accident in a shop, secondhand bookshop. A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, Stephen Mitford Goodson. He was a banker. He was a banker in South Africa. So this one's kind of hard to find, but it's a very easy read, thin, but lots of references, footnotes, and even some pictures as well, which is always nice to see. So, yeah, Clive Menzies. I like his stuff. I think he's worth looking into, and he's just one of the few sort of talking heads that I was introduced to recently, and I think actually has something refreshing and comprehensive and useful and valuable to say, rather than just going on about the news. Because a lot of the talking heads do that. A lot of them are just keeping you focused on the news cycle. And the news, of course, is pumped out by the mainstream media and the news agencies, and the whole point of that is to keep you stressed and overwhelmed and freaked out and focusing on problems that you can do nothing about, so you feel disempowered and you feel like you can't affect change in the world, and it makes you go and watch sport and drink a beer and play some computer games and put some porn on and just waste your time on things that make you feel distracted and therefore comfortable in the short term, but actually ruin your life if they are repeated and used too often in the long term. And that media machine is really there to just push you towards these kind of destructive habits. It's not there to inform you. It's not there to empower you with good quality, truthful information, it's mind control. It's mind manipulation, right? So don't do it to yourself. Just switch it off. But the people who make their living by just commenting on the stuff that the news puts out, and debunking it and analyzing it and reacting to it and all that kind of stuff, they're just doing the same thing. They're just reinforcing the same narratives that the news and the media machine's pumping out there. So that's another reason to turn them off too, and go to people more like Clive Menzies, for example, who's done this deep dive, this deep research, and is talking from a place of experience because he was in the financial industries in London. So he's got the insider view on things, but he's also got solutions. He's got things that he can offer that you can take away and do. And I'm going to find up and pull up his page about co-creative learning. That's the one. So I said he did this sort of process with his, I don't know if they were his friends or his colleagues or something, but it's co-creative learning to unleash human potential. And what he says in his presentations is the conclusions that he's reached to. He's not trying to get you to believe that this is correct. He says, if you go through a co-creative learning process with another group of people, you will probably come to the same conclusion as we did, because this is a process we went through. And it's interesting because it tells you what to do, right? So you've got a how-to, you got process, principles, and sources. It gives you a guide how to start a co-creative learning group. And I think it's very interesting. I haven't spent too much time looking at all the processes and the plan, but the bits that I did read, here's a quick start guide. Step 1, form a group. So get together with some friends, some curious people. Hey, do you want to learn more about the world? Hey, are you fed up with, the entertainment and the mainstream media? Do you actually want to do some learning that is going to be healing and wholesome and productive and healthy as compared to the mind rape that you get when you engage with lots of media these days? So step 1 is get together with some people, and then get a notebook, pencil, and eraser. This bit I was happy with because it's so old school. It was like, what? Paper and pencil? I mean, shouldn't that say ChatGPT? No. Paper, pencil, eraser. Step 3, you're holding regular meetings. So you hold a first meeting and you agree on an identity for the group and the question. What is the question that you as a group are trying to answer? And then you schedule 40 weeks of regular meetings in a neutral venue. So they advise, don't go in someone's home. Someone has a bit more power and authority if you're in their home. Go somewhere neutral, coffee shop, pub, whatnot. And then it says, after the first meeting, start to explore and circulate information relevant to the focus. Make a group online and an email list where you can keep all that information. And then follow the process. Pay attention to the principles. Beware beware sections in how to. So there's a beware section. So traps and pitfalls and things to avoid. It says develop your model of the political economy. It says don't try to create a model. It will create itself from the process. So I like that. It's a process of uncovering truth, because truth exists. It is immutable. It is, as Mark Passio would say, stubborn. It is belligerent. That's the word he uses. I said stubborn because I couldn't remember the word he uses, but the word he uses is belligerent. Like, it doesn't go away because you ignore it and fight it and cry and kick and scream and hate it. It is what is truth, right? It's reality. So when you are learning, if you're doing it properly, what you're trying to do is just uncover truth. And if you have this commitment to uncovering the truth, finding where the truth is, finding what the truth is, going wherever it takes you, then it's a process of uncovering, right? So as they say here, you're not creating something. You're not coming up with and creating something new. There's nothing new under the sun. There is just reality and what is. So this is a process of truth discovery, meaning that when you get there, you're going to get, if you've done it properly, if they've done it properly, he and his friends have done it properly, then you're going to get to the same place as they got to, because truth is truth. It doesn't change depending on who's looking for it, right? So I like that. Step 7 is to share your analysis by publishing a snapshot. And then step 8 is to continue but update this snapshot periodically when you feel that you have uncovered more important stuff to plug into it and update it. And then it says at step 9, at the risk of repetition, don't rush the process. Like nature and the universe, co-creative learning is fluid, dynamic, and circular, not static and linear. In a world that is constantly evolving, our learning too must evolve if we are to adapt and thrive. So I was really compelled by this idea, and I started to think about maybe I can get some people together here in Manchester, and maybe we could. I've already got a venue in mind that we could meet at, and it's actually at the back of a bookshop. And so I'm already thinking, oh, this would be a cool thing to get involved with and to do, right? And then, of course, you've got plenty more resources on the website here. There's a further learning section, the beware section. So beware what to problems to avoid. And yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was worth mentioning as a solution. So that's Clive Menzies' website. And the website, again, I'll just go back to this cam, is cocreativelearning.org. I chuck that in the chat for you all because you're lovely. And I like to share things that are useful. And I think we are going to benefit from going a bit more old school. And you should know this about me by now, that I want to go old school. It's the books. You know, I got a pencil and some books. I use these little note cards as well to write things on and bookmarks and capture ideas. I use my little sticky tabs. And I think this is the way we got to go, because the AI-mediated, digitally accelerated way of doing things is a shortcut that leaves us worse off at the end of it. We lose our abilities by using a lot of these tools if we don't use them with intention and care and caution, right? I do use AI. I am learning. I'm not hooked on it, using it all day, every day, but I do dip in and out, and I'm very cautious about what I get it to do and how I use it. And you don't want to become reliant on these sorts of things. So going the old school way, starting a book club, reading, taking notes, learning to summarize the things that you read in your own words and to respond to them as you respond to them. You know, I was chatting to a friend in the Cutting Through the Matrix book club who's going to take on the task of presenting one of the upcoming sections of the book we're reading, which is a book by Alan Watt, Waiting for the Miracle. And she was saying she's nervous and she wasn't quite sure how it was going to go, and she felt that she might not be good enough to do it, and she was unprepared. And I said, look, all you've got to do is read the material, and then any word or phrase or sentence or idea that is interesting to you and sparks a thought, share that. And that's it. That's really, it's really very simple. You don't have to be the authoritative, encyclopedic memory that can recite all the names, dates, places, and interpretations and etymological roots of words and history and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. That's fine. But to be honest, the people who can do that usually bore the shite out of most people who can't do that, because it's like, because you just get overwhelmed with all this information. Even if it's true factual information, just spewing lots and lots and lots of factual information out in a massive torrent can be really overwhelming, because most people can't do that, and they can't capture it all and remember it all. So read a bit, like I do with these books. Read a bit, and every now and again a word or a phrase will spark some thought in your mind, and then you can express that. And it's actually much simpler and easier than I think people might expect it to be. And I think more people could do it and be good at it. There is no good and bad. That's my point. There's no good and bad, really. It's like you read the thing, and then you just talk about what it brings up for you and what it reminds you of and what it makes you think of. And I think that is something that more of us could do more often. And starting a sort of co-creative learning group or a book club or a study group of some kind. This has been advocated by Alan Watt as well. I'm sure I've heard him say before, get together, even if it's just one person, and read a book and talk about it. Even if it's just you and one other person, it's worth doing that. And then gradually find other people, invite them along, and you start to find out that you're uncovering and doing this co-creative learning process. But if you need a little handrail, a guide, something that will get you on the right track that you can follow in a step-by-step process, then co-creativelearning.org is the place where you can grab that framework. Melissa, CTTM, says, weird, I can't comment on YouTube, had to join you on Odyssey. That is strange. How is the feed on Odyssey? To me, it looks a bit slow and jerky because I think I lowered the frame rate on the advice of the Odyssey help tech people. So that might be why it's looking a bit jerky. It looks like it's up to speed though, so that's good. I have no idea why you can't comment on on YouTube. Well, I do have an idea. The powers that be don't want certain people talking to each other. Okay. That is it for tonight's Preamble Ramble. I got way off topic. I started talking about communism and recapping Fabian Freeway, and then I ended up talking about Talking Heads and the news cycle, and then telling you about Clive Menzies, and now we've got co-creativelearning.org in our minds. What can I say to wrap up this little section of the intro? Just that, yeah, we're going to learn Zbigniew Brzezinski's information on communism, and it's a wide topic, it's a broad topic, but like all the systems we've been given, communism was not authentic. The story of it is not as it is described. It was funded, it was planned, it was commissioned. The people who wrote the founding documents and the theory behind it were funded. They were propped up. They were puppets who had backing and support, right? I was reading a little about Karl Marx somewhere yesterday, and it was saying that he never had a job in his entire life. He never ran a business. He never did nothing. He was just coasting off and being supported by wealthy friends and patrons, and then he comes up with this genius philosophy, this genius idea about capitalism and labor and all this stuff. Okay, you got to look into these people, because I don't think any household name we know the truth about them, really. And somebody said as well, I think under a video or in a chat somewhere, I think in my Telegram group, if you know their name, if it's a household name, they're in the game, right? All the household names are provided to us. These are heroes that are rolled out, and we are supposed to laud them as geniuses and untouchable, intelligent heroes that can do no wrong. And they just saw things that we could never see, and they just came up with ideas and concepts that we could never understand. Bitcoin Mining says his dad thought he was lazy too. Yeah. Well, there you are. And this is actually the theme that came up out of the Fabian Freeway book when we were learning about Fabian socialists. It's a bunch of middle-class people who don't want to work. It's a bunch of middle-class people who want to manage everybody. They want to be bureaucrats. They want to put the rules in place and the systems and structures that they can administer, and they'll just be lifelong pencil-pushing, form-filling bureaucrats while other people go out and produce through the efforts of their labor. And that's what it's all about. And that's what really the name of the game is all about, is the dominant minority trying to live off the sweat and the labor of the majority, and all the different justifications and systems that they concoct and sell to us and indoctrinate us with, which make us go along with it and think it's natural and normal. And, oh, yes, we need a class of royalty, of royal families and aristocracy and bureaucrats and politicians and bankers who contribute absolutely nothing material or productive to the world, apart from rules, regulations, licenses, punishments, and just turn this whole place into a real Kafkaesque bureaucratic hellhole that we all have to navigate and live within, right? But they don't produce anything, and that's the plan. That's the goal. They don't want to produce anything. They don't want to work. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They just want to skim the cream off the top and keep it for themselves and keep everyone else enslaved, working for them, you know? So there you go. That's my preamble ramble for today. I hope you enjoyed it. It was quite a ramble indeed. We went all over the place, but it's 7:15, 45 minutes into the stream. We better crack on with reading the book. I think Turbs over on Rumble says the stream is okay on Rumble. So if you are having trouble, you could consider hopping over to Rumble. Odyssey looks like it's still buffering a little bit, but it's pretty much up to date, not lagging too far behind. I don't know. We'll see. So, before we get into the book, I would like to remind people that streaming does take a bit of work. And if you do want to support at any point, you can go to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, where you can find links to all sorts of things. But it's mainly my social media hangouts, my channels, and ways to support if you are able to and you choose to do so. You can buy me a coffee. You can donate via PayPal. I need to update this. I've got a new email now. I've got a better email address, but you can still send an email to this one if you want to get in touch, ask me a question, tell me something interesting, book recommendation, etc. And I've got some music up on SoundCloud that you can check out if you're interested. And if you do like the guitar music on the intros and the outros, you can download the whole bundle of guitar music here for free. And you can also join the book club, which is going on every Wednesday at the moment. And we're just about getting to the end of The First Global Revolution by the Club of Rome. It's been a really good read, and I've enjoyed going through that book a lot. It's interesting to flesh out the context of the infamous quote about the enemy of humanity being humanity, and how we're going to have to blame global warming and use that as the reason why we have to unite everybody underneath a one world control system, right? But that is there, and I think it's a really good offer, because if you join the book club, you also get a lot of replays of things that I've done in the past, which is Surveillance Valley, which is also 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. Both those books are real paradigm-shifting reads, in my opinion. And I've also got the Continuity of Control email series, which looks a little bit like this. Oh, no, hang on. This is the book club. Well, we'll go back to that. I'll tell you about the Continuity of Control first. So this is a 9-part email series, and it documents the open plan for world control. You can see all the books we talk about on the right. We've got Mankind at the Turning Point. That's the Club of Rome. We've got the Anglo-American Establishment, Carol Quigley. We've got some Julian Huxley in there. Zbigniew is in there too. We've also got H.G. Wells, The Open Conspiracy. We've got Aldous Huxley, Charles Galton Darwin. And what I did was I grabbed all the craziest, spiciest quotes from these books, and I put them into a chronological email series. Then you can have delivered to your inbox on a weekly basis for free. And at the end of it, you get to download the whole bunch of goodies. You get the emails, you get the quotes, and you get pictures of the quotes that I took from the books that I have in my library, just to prove to you these are real quotes, and I'm not just making things up. And that's all for free. But if you want to get your hands on that faster, you can join the book club, and you can go to the classroom, and then you can click on Continuity of Control right here, and then you can get the images, the full quote bank, and the full email series. Download a copy of that, print it out, send it to your mum. And as a friend of mine recently did read one of these emails to his mum, and she said, "Ooh, big stuff." It was the email about Julian Huxley's explanation of the philosophy of UNESCO and how it was going to be a scientific, humanists, eugenics type of philosophy. But you can go here and you can grab, for example, you can look, if you want to look at the source images, no preview available, bad choice. We can go to the quote bank, and there's all the books. I took that picture, and this PDF is pretty good. It's hyperlinked. So you've got a little welcome, a little how to use a document, and then let's say you just want to look at the quotes from I don't know, Brave New World Revisited. Click there, and there they all are. And this document is just quotes. It's no commentary. So these are longer quotes, so you get the context of what's being said. And I've underlined the interesting themes that emerge over this kind of 70-year tour through elite writings. And there you go. You can have that if you want it. I think it's a pretty good resource. It's pretty nifty and it's useful. It's good to give people a nice starter for 10 in these kinds of topics. So that's continuitycontrol.com. It is allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. And the book club link is school.com/devised. And people are like, why is it called Devised? Well, it's just called that because that was a different thing that I was going to do before I decided to keep it as a book club. I need to change that URL, but it cost me £100 to change the URL on school.com. So, you know, I'm just putting it off until it's absolutely necessary. So that's it. That's it for the intro. If you can support, I would appreciate it very much. Unfortunately, in this day and age, things that you don't support tend to go away. I will keep going as long as I can. Excuse me, I just cleared my throat right into the microphone there. I'm usually better than that at muting myself. But I'm going to keep doing this for as long as I can because I love doing it. And I feel like I'm actually starting to learn something after 2 years of reading books on live streams. I feel like I'm actually starting to get better at communicating these ideas and connecting the dots and helping other people understand what we're learning and what we're figuring out and what we're uncovering by reading these books, you know? Because you get a lot more by diving into these books than you get just, watching the news or going to school or university or watching all the talking heads. So this is tonight's reading, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I'm practicing my pronunciation, can't you tell? So part 3, Communism, the Problem of Relevance. The last section we did was Ideas and Ideals Beyond Ideology. And in this, he was talking about how people are sort of fragmented and broken down. Earlier in the book, he's talked about how the Technotronic era means that people are totally bombarded and overwhelmed by information from all over the world, which leaves them feeling kind of helpless and hopeless. And he's also taken a swing at things like Christianity and Marxism as not being really as not being appropriate or useful or helpful in the modern world. And I think he's, like so many of these writers and books and so-called thinkers, he's kind of laying the groundwork for, well, you know, we're going to need a one-world system of control to unite everybody. And he did plant that seed in the last section of the book. There was a quote. So he says here, it is possible that in the present phase of intellectual turmoil, there are, for the first time, the seeds of a globally relevant perspective. So he's talking about this thinking of things on the global scale. And the other thing, he did mention somewhere else a global revolution, which was quite amazing. But I forget whereabouts that quote was, maybe a bit further back. But he did kind of paraphrase the same idea as the Club of Rome wrote their book on in 1991, which is the first global revolution. He did say something very similar to that. There we go. This new revolution almost simultaneously affects the entire globe. So it's a new revolution and it's affecting the globe. So it's a global revolution. So a lot of synchronicities and a lot of coherence between this book and the first global revolution, which is why it's been really good to read them sort of in parallel. But tonight, we're continuing with part 3, Communism, the Problem of Relevance. This is the second time I've read that now, but we'll actually get into the book. Here we go. Marxism, born of the social upheaval produced by the combined effects of the industrial and nationalist revolutions, provided a unique intellectual tool for understanding and harnessing the fundamental forces of our time. As both a product and a response to a particularly traumatic phase in man's history, it supplied the best available insight into contemporary reality. It infused political action with strong ethical elements. It formed the basis for a sustained attack on antiquated, pre-industrial social institutions, and it raised the banner of internationalism in an age increasingly dominated by national hatreds. Yes. So they're always taking a swing at nationalism, and they're always lauding and supporting and celebrating internationalism. I think, but he's not giving us a complete picture of Marxism. No, of course he's not. He's going to give us the textbook story of Marxism, the kind that you get in your school or your university course. As the first state to have put Marxist theory into practice, the Soviet Union could have emerged as the standard bearer of this century's most influential system of thought, and as the social model for resolving the key dilemmas facing modern man. Yet today, Soviet communism is a conservative, bureaucratized doctrine. Yeah, so it's this old chestnut of, well, if they did it properly, it'd be really good. It's just never been done properly. In China, the scene of the most extensive application of Marxist principles to extreme industrial backwardness, communism is a curious mixture of ethnocentric nationalism and ideological fundamentalism. In the more advanced West, communism is vital only to the extent that it blurs its ideological identity by collaborating with its erstwhile ideological rivals. And in the East, its ideological militancy feeds on a deliberate identification with the most fanatic nationalist passions. In sum, contemporary communism has sacrificed Marxism's Promethean commitment to universal humanism. And this humanism, we've looked into that before as well on the channel. I think part of Fabian Freeway. And humanism, if you read about it on Wikipedia, just basically boils down to relativism. It's kind of like, well, whatever's good for the human is good. And obviously all humans have sort of different unique situations and needs, and therefore it kind of just leads you to this relativistic sort of system. But humanism is also what Julian Huxley says is going to be the driving force and foundational ethos and philosophy of UNESCO in that book, UNESCO, its philosophy and its purpose and philosophy. So it's all linked, and it's kind of the same ideology and ideas rebranded, changed, repackaged for different audiences and different times. The tragedy of communism as a universal perspective is that it came both too early and too late. It was too early to be a source of true internationalism because mankind was only just awakening to national self-awareness, and because the limited technological means of communication available were not yet ready to reinforce a universal perspective. That the way he's put reinforce a universal perspective, I think he spelled, if you took away the R and the I and just had enforce, would probably be more accurate. Reinforce a universal perspective. It reminds me of what was that word they used when they said when they admitted there was a conspiracy to fortify the election over in the United States. You remember that? Was it a Times article or New York Times or something like that? And it was like the secret cabal of philanthropist business leaders who fortified the election to make sure Biden was elected, something like that. It's that kind of silly language. But yeah, when he says, mankind, we were just too immature. We weren't yet mature enough to understand the benefits of internationalism and the importance of belonging to a global hive mind that will make all problems disappear, as well as all individuals. But They didn't have the technology. This is what I think is key as well. He says the technology was limited, and he says he only focuses on technological means of communication. But I'd say more broadly, the technology was limited. Now it's not, right? Now they've got all this surveillance, all this data, and all of these AI models that can crunch it and parse it and pull out the themes very, very quickly. And you're seeing that they're just rolling that out, and it's just coming whether you like it or not. We talked in the past couple of videos about the petition that got 3 million signatures saying we don't want digital ID, and the government's response was, we're giving you digital ID. So the technology is here now to properly roll out communism. That's the point that I'm saying. They had a stab at it, 100 years ago, but they just didn't have the surveillance on everybody at all times. They didn't have people willingly walking around with microphones and cameras all the time and sharing their most intimate personal details all the time, and just being totally comfortable with constant big tech surveillance all day, every day. If they had that 100 years ago at the first attempt of communism, they would have succeeded, no problem, because as many people say, once you're locked into it, it's going to be very hard to get out of it. This is why a lot of people are describing digital ID as the hill to die on. I don't think it's quite that dramatic, as I said when I got heckled a couple of videos back. But it is important. People have really got to wean themselves off the devices themselves. They've got to wean themselves off carrying a smartphone around all the time. And it's convenient. Of course, it's convenient. Yeah, it's very convenient to have one of these things. But unless you put it down and stop using it, you're just going to get herded into this digital system of communist control. That's the simplicity truth. And I was thinking the other day, you see people, they're just staring at these things and they're carrying them around, children, adults alike, old, young, couples ignoring each other, friends ignoring each other, staring at these little things. It's only a matter of time before they say, do you know what? Instead of having to carry this thing around and charge it up and carry a battery pack so you keep it charged, and why don't we just give you a little implant that'll just allow you to do all that stuff? It'll be way more convenient than carrying around these black rectangles that break easily and get stolen. And this got all, and if they don't work, you're screwed because your card details are on there and your email accounts are on there. If someone steals it or it stops working, you can't pay for things, you can't access your communications, and blah 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 blah. Why don't we just give you a little chip? It won't hurt. It's just like a little prick, it'll be over in 2 seconds, and it'll be so convenient for you. And you can just see it where it's going. It's clear as day. That'll be the hill to die on when they want to put it in your body. But before we get to that point, I would suggest people strongly consider just giving the devices up, going back to the stupid old phones. Get yourself a minimalist phone like this one, which is made by Mudita, Mudita. Get yourself a little minimalist phone, e-ink minimalist phone like that. If you go, I've shown this menu before on the stream. I can't even unlock it. That's good. It doesn't work. There we go. That's all I've got on this phone. You can't even, there's no app store. There's no browser. There's no internet. You can uninstall the one or more of those 12 apps, but you can't add new ones. That is all you get on this phone. It's great. And so when they're like, okay, just download our new whatever government ID app to your phone and use that to log in, I'm gonna be like, well, I can't. I physically don't have a device that will allow me to do that. Or I'll say something like, yeah, I'll be happy to download your app. Can you just show me how to do it? And they'll be like, yeah, no problem. And then you pass them this phone. And they, what? And they swipe, how do you install apps? I'm like, oh, you can't install apps. There's no internet on there. You see what I mean? And that's kind of the legalistic thing of never saying no. You always say yes if. It's about conditional acceptance on things, right? This was something I learned about during the no jab, no job days. Remember those? You remember when they locked the world down and they bullied and coerced us all into taking experimental gene therapy injections and threatened us that we couldn't travel or have jobs unless we took those injections? Remember that? Did that happen? Did that really happen? Or was that just a bad dream that I had. Anyway, I get confused. It might have just been a film I watched. I get mixed up between reality and fiction these days. But I was thinking back then, and I was learning about how when these kinds of offers come your way, the best way to handle it is to do a conditional acceptance. So, yes, I'll take your experimental gene therapy injection in order to keep my job if you sign this document which says you will accept liability for any and all negative effects which may happen to me as a result of taking this injection. And then your employer is going to be like, "Fuck you, no, I'm not signing that thing." And then you're like, "Well, I was willing to go, but you're saying you're not signing it. I think that's fair. You're making me do this to keep my job. I think it's fair that you take liability, to the tune of million, whatever, name your figure, £100,000, £1 million, whatever it might be." So these conditional acceptance method, if you call it that, or technique, I don't know, it's quite powerful, very important. It's a way to avoid conflict. It's not like, "No, fuck you, get your needle away from me" kind of thing. It's a little smarter, and it's a little more intelligent way to handle these sorts of situations. So, yeah, total tangent there. And we're not even one page into this chapter, so I'll get back to it now. Okay. Communism. They didn't have the technology to roll it out, but they do now. That's the gist. Okay, it came too late for the industrial West because nationalism and liberal concepts of state reformism preempted its humanist appeal. Communism having a humanist appeal. Can you believe, right? Like, he was aware of the deaths, the starvation, the millions murdered under communism, and he's like, "Oh, it had such a humanist appeal." I guess I do get it. That's how people signed up to it. It's like, don't you care about the workers and their families and their children? Don't you want to make things better for them? So it did have a humanist appeal, but it's just funny to hear, like, in retrospect, knowing the outcome of it. But I suppose he's trying to paint that picture, like that. He's trying to paint that narrative like it was that wasn't the plan all along to inflict that kind of carnage and death and destruction upon people. So I suppose he is painting it in the textbook way. So too late for the industrial West and too early for the pre-industrial West, where it served as the ideological alarm clock for the dormant masses, stimulating in them increasingly radical nationalism. Too late in the West, too early in the East, communism found its moment of opportunity in neither West nor East, but in the halfway house of Russia. Its failures and successes, as well as its specific character, therefore, have to be seen in the context of that peculiar 50-year tie between a would-be universalist doctrine and a highly specific Eurasian national setting. To the present-day world, the practical reality of communism is mainly what Russia has made of it. To modern man, communism in China represents only a potential and does not offer a relevant example. Though some aspects of Chinese communism, its alleged puritanism, its seemingly permanent revolution, its ideological militancy, may appeal to the more disaffected and emotional Western intellectuals, as a social model, China offers little guidance to those concerned with the problems of advanced industrial civilization. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because we often hear some of the talking heads, David Icke springs to mind, say that China's the model for the West, and they've got the social credit system, and they've got the facial scanning gates to in their streets, and they've got the I saw footage of a machine where you put your jewelry in it. You put your gold jewelry in there, and it smelts it down, analyzes it, and then puts money in your bank account to match the value of that gold. I don't know if it's true. Like, I don't know. I mean, I just saw footage of it. It could have been faked at this point. All the footage we see that we haven't seen before. We got to entertain the possibility that it might just be fake footage made by somebody with an AI tool of some description. But I did see footage of a machine that allegedly does that. And so it's interesting here that he's sort of dismissing the Chinese communism system. Oh, no, that's not going to appeal to anybody in the West, even though the likes of the Rockefellers invested heavily there, and Henry Kissinger, Zbignew's kind of equivalent on the right side of the political aisle, went over there, didn't he, to help open it up, and all the elites and oligarchs and powerful, wealthy industrialists agreed to make it into the world's producer of plastic stuff. So there's a much closer tie with China than I think he's kind of letting on here, saying that it might appeal to some emotional Western intellectuals, but there's not much. There's nothing important there when we're thinking about the problems of advanced industrial civilization. No, nothing. Although, do you remember when it was praised for how heavy-handed it was during lockdowns, how rapidly it acted to lock so many people in their homes, and there was even footage going around of people being, they were sealing the doors to apartment blocks to stop people getting out. Right? Again, could be totally fake footage. I have no idea. I'm not saying it's true. I just remember it getting posted and passed around back then. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Continuing. Still struggling with its own backwardness, suffering from political uncertainties, mired in conflict with its immediate neighbors, increasingly signifying its Marxism-Leninism. Okay, new word alert. What is signifying? I'm going to have to pull up a little dictionary.com tab. I probably shouldn't use dictionary.com. I bet it's like the worst dictionary online, but I'm just in the habit. Signifying. Oh, nothing. But it does have signifying, so maybe that's a typo. But it's like capitalized as well. Signifying its Marxism-Leninism. Weird. I don't know. I don't know about that one. I'm not turning anything up when I look for it on my side. We'll do a general search. I just keep getting results for signifying. So I don't know. Oh, Sino equals China. Thank you, Frank. Yeah, you're right. Good call. So maybe we could. So it's like the Chineseification of Marxism-Leninism. Yeah, would you agree? Would you agree? We'll call it. We'll say what they mean by signifying. They mean Chineseification. I'm going to coin a new word. Seen as. Why not? What are you going to do? You going to stop me? Who's going to stop me? So increasingly Chinesifying its Marxism-Leninism, because of course Marxism-Leninism was. Well, Marx was in Britain, wasn't he? So is it British? China may be a revolutionary symbol for some, but it hardly offers a blueprint for coping with the social and psychological dilemmas posed by the post-industrial age. To be sure, China may appear in a different light to some of the would-be revolutionary elites in the less developed nations. For some of them, China provides an attractive example of national discipline and ideological dedication, of a massive social effort to modernize in spite of technological backwardness. But even on this level, the Chinese model is relevant only as an example of will and purpose, as a guide to the future, not as an example of how communism responds to the problems of modernity. The experience of the Soviet Union provides the only answer to that crucial test. So we're going to be focusing on Soviet Union and its Marxism-Leninism, and we're not going to be looking at the Chinese version. So this would be chapter 1, part 3, chapter 1, the Stalinist paradox. One man dominated almost 2/3 of Soviet history, and his name is associated with both a system of rule and a particular approach to constructing communism. No examination of communism's contemporary role in the world, to say nothing of within the Soviet Union, can afford to overlook Stalin's role and Stalin's legacy. That legacy is, again, sorry, I just got to pounce on this word role, because it takes us back to the America's role. Oh, I probably shouldn't write on the cover, should I? Well, whatever, I've done it now. role. America's role, Stalin's role. They're playing a role, people. They're like Trump has a role, Musk has a role, Keir Starmer has a role. These are all actors on the world stage with scripts handed to them, with plot points and events to play out and act out. And that word just, to me, is a little tip, a little nod, a little wink saying, yeah, it's all an act. But that legacy is represented by the Soviet state's current institutions and modes of operation, and even though almost 2 decades have passed since Stalin's death, any Soviet discussion of reform still inevitably revolves around the question of breaking with Stalinism. This is quite understandable. The Soviet state and the Soviet society of today were created by an unprecedented social revolution deliberately carried out by the political elite and the bankers who funded them. Violent and costly, that revolution should not be confused with the Bolshevik seizure of power in 1917, for it occurred more than a decade later. During the crucial years of 1930 to 1940, in the course of which Soviet society was reshaped to mirror the ideological aspirations of the political rulers, that revolution consumed at least 6.5 million lives. And there's a little footnote here saying the most detailed accounting is in Robert Conquest's The Great Terror, published in 1968. He concludes that approximately 1 million persons were actually executed between 1936 and 1938, that at least 2 million more died in camps during these years, to which one may also add that at least 3.5 million who died during the collectivization. My own calculations are that of the ruling party's 2.4 million members, no less than 850,000 were purged during 1937 and 1938 alone. That's the permanent purge, published in 1956. It should be noted that estimates made by others have been higher. Yes, a lot of death. And these 6.5 million lives were lost as the new Soviet state took shape. Continuing. It was that revolution which spawned Soviet Russia's present political elite. It was that revolution which is said to have constructed the first socialist society based on Marxism and to have laid the foundations for its eventual entrance into communism. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, so that sentence there kind of underpins what we learned in Fabian Freeway, which is that socialism is a stage which occurs on the way to communism. That's how I read it. It was the first socialist society based on Marxism, and the foundation was laid to eventually become communism. Interesting that he acknowledges that there. It is also that revolution which begs the question whether that specific character was necessary to assure the industrial development associated so integrally with the creation of the new society. Yeah, I just caught your comment, Turbs, on Rumble. Scares me how many people have just brushed COVID off and forgot about it. Yeah, I know. It is, isn't it? It's mad. It's almost like it was like hypnosis thing, you know. You just snap your fingers and you will forget everything that's just happened. Bah, gone from people's memory. General Meow Meow says, socialism is a gateway drug. That's a good way to think about it. I like it. It is a gateway drug. Once you pop, you can't stop. It's like Pringles. Okay, the next section is the necessity of Stalinism. The question of the necessity of Stalinism should not be confused with that of its inevitability. In retrospect, inevitability can always be more easily detected in what did happen than in what did not. Stalinism became inevitable because Marxist power first took root in a specific Russian environment formed by an autocratic political tradition, intellectual frustration, and a strong propensity toward messianism. As a result, certain facets of Marxism were reinforced at the expense of others. It was Lenin's contribution, and the mark of his genius, to have been able to adapt Marxism to his native Russia, and in so doing to have created both Marxist-Leninist ideology and the Bolshevik Party. Lenin's victory over his rivals within the Russian Marxist movement, and more important, his seizure of power upon the collapse of the old autocratic structure, laid the basis for the successful de-Westernization of Marxism, a victory of Oriental despotic propensities over Occidental democratic tendencies. His emphasis on dogmatic belief, on violence, on conspiratorial activity, and on the almost total subordination of the individual to the party, and that's got a word, I suppose that's a Russian word, partinost. But that's an important point. The individual is nothing. It's all about the collective. As well as his intolerance of dissent and his paranoid suspiciousness, all to some extent characteristic of Marx's own behavior, both reflected and extended the brutal autocratic tradition in which he operated. It can therefore be argued that Stalin's emergence as top leader, and particularly the Oriental style and mood of his despotism, was facilitated, if not dictated, by Lenin's concept of the party as an elitist group suspicious of the trade union mentality of the workers and hostile to the inertia and conservatism of the peasants. Intolerance of opposition and insistence on obedience to the party facilitated the emergence of a bureaucratically skilled dictator capable of exploiting these traditions to paralyze would-be opponents and rivals. Writing from entirely different perspectives, Leonard Shapiro and Isaac Deutscher, who certainly did not see eye to eye either on Leninism or Stalinism, both conveyed the degree to which Leninism made Stalinism possible by inhibiting effective opposition within the party to Stalin's consolidation of power. If Lenin did not make Stalin inevitable, he at least made effective opposition to him within the party impossible. The question of the necessity of Stalinism is, however, a different one. It pertains to the problem of whether Stalinist methods and the resulting Stalinist system were needed to effect the socialist revolution and particularly industrialization. Even if it is assumed that Stalinism as a political system was inevitable, it does not follow that the enormous human sacrifice that Stalin extracted from the Soviet people was necessary to modernize and industrialize Russia and the non-Russian nations of the USSR. That sacrifice may have been necessary to preserve the Stalinist system, but to advance that proposition is to shift the ground of the argument and to make the case that to maintain Stalin's power, Stalinist means had to be used. There is no gainsaying that argument. There's a footnote here for this little point he just made, which says, the Stalinist theory that class struggle intensifies as progress towards socialism accelerates, which conflicts with the notion that class struggle is a consequence of the existence of hostile classes, but which justifies increased police terror, was functionally convenient to the interests of Stalin's policies and power. Right. So as suffering and struggle and pain and all that stuff is increasing, you got him standing there saying, this means we're making progress. The more suffering and struggle that there is, the more progress we're making. We'll get there eventually. Utopia's just on the horizon. Keep going. It does not, however, provide an answer to the question whether Stalinist methods had to be used to modernize and industrialize Russia and the non-Russian nations of the Soviet Union, to modernize and industrialize Russia and the non-Russian nations of the Soviet Union. The question is important because the entire edifice of Soviet legitimacy, the authority and the power of the present Soviet elite, is derived from the claim that the past is essentially one of glorious and heroic achievement, only slightly marred by Stalin's occasional misconduct vis-à-vis some of his comrades. Despite the extraordinarily detailed and gory accounts of Stalin's crimes made available to the entire Soviet public during the 22nd Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1961, the tendency of the post-Khrushchev Soviet leaders has been to minimize Stalin's misdeeds and to stress the accomplishments of the 30s. The implication is that the party acted correctly throughout, and hence that its claim to power is derived from the essentially infallible leadership it has provided both in the past and in the present. It is on this contention that the present Soviet political system bases its claim to morality and universality. To question the form of the transformation of the Soviet society is to question the legitimacy of the present rulers, albeit indirectly. Even more, it is to question the international relevance of the Soviet model, and particularly its Leninist, Stalinist concentration of power in the hands of a small, bureaucratic party elite. The events in Czechoslovakia in 1968, the Soviet attacks on the Chinese Cultural Revolution because it undermined the primacy of Chinese party officials, and the long-standing Soviet criticism of the Yugoslav dilution of party supremacy all show the extent to which the Soviet elite still considers its political model to be of broader significance. This link between domestic interests and foreign aspirations explains Soviet sensitivity to suggestions by both Marxist and non-Marxist scholars that the Stalinist mode of transforming Soviet society was wasteful, cruel, and most important, neither outstandingly successful nor necessary. Did Stalin have any alternative? At least some Russians, Marxists as well as non-Marxists, had envisaged means by which Russian industrialization could have been achieved in a manner less physically and morally costly than that pursued by Stalin, though on a comparatively ambitious scale. Even before the 1917 revolution, Russian scholars were drawing up plans for the modernization of their country. Perhaps the most important plan was contained in the study concluded in 1918 by Professor V. Grinevetsky, rector of the Moscow Institute of Technology, which outlined a systematic program to last several decades for the development of the country. According to an extremely informative analysis of this study, in addition to providing for deliberate state action, Grinevetsky placed greater emphasis than Soviet planners did on price signals and profit criteria as a means by which to arrive, quote, in most cases at the same priorities, policies, and even specific investment choices as those selected by Soviet planners in disregard of these criteria. Indeed, the top priorities adopted by Soviet planners in the early five-year plans closely matched those envisaged by Grinevetsky: electrification, the relocation of industry and population eastward, hydroelectric development, canal construction, and so forth. Though the standard Soviet claim has been that Soviet industrialization was derived from, quote, the granite foundations of Marxism-Leninism, there is abundant evidence that Soviet planners, some of them Grinevetsky's former colleagues, relied heavily on his work, accepting his targets, though rejecting his formula for a more flexible decision-making process, and for greater, though not exclusive, reliance on price signals and profit criteria. So we're just going to adjust the lighting there. It seems a bit bright. Within the Communist Party, there were also alternative plans for industrialization, most notably those coming from Bukharin and the so-called right opposition. Of course, there was alternatives and other ways of doing things. There always is. There's always untold numbers of alternative ways of doing things. But we're kind of sold this idea that the way things are is the only way they could be. And there is a quote that Alan has mentioned and referred to, but I forget who it is that said it. But the idea is that we're kept in this very narrow reality, and we're conditioned to believe that this is the only natural evolution and way that things could be, even though there's, I don't know, who knows how many alternatives and possibilities and different ways of doing things. And this is kind of one of the clues as well that we're already in a one world system, is when you fly around the world, if you can, if you're able, and you see that most places are basically the same. The cities look the same. People's days are kind of the same. The work and the jobs and the technology and the clothes and the food is all roughly the same. And it is standardized and homogenized, and increasingly so as every day rolls by, thanks to largely the internet and technology and screens and people's addiction to these things. So there's many different ways that things could be done, but the way it is now is not natural. It is by design. All the systems are man-made. And it seems to me a bit of a redundant question to be asking, is there another way it could have been done? Was Stalinism really necessary? I don't know. We'll see where he goes as he's answering it. But it's not a surprise to me that there's people like this Grinevetsky character who are coming up with other ways of doing things. I'm sure he was met a very unseemly end with a gun to the back of his head or something like that. Unless he just fell in line and didn't talk about it. But I can imagine him being frustrated when he saw his plans and his advice, the things that he recommended being carried out, but in a way that was also causing so much mayhem. But there was also Bukharin and the right opposition who were continuing. Somewhat like Grinevetsky, they advocated a policy in which positive inducements would be employed to encourage the peasants to increase their production and to make the urban population share some of the social burdens of industrialization, the timetable for which would be somewhat extended. They were particularly opposed to rapid coercive collectivization, the means used by Stalin to extract a surplus from the peasantry. And in that opposition, they were later supported even by Trotsky, who initially had been a strong opponent of Bukharin. By 1930, Trotsky had concluded that the physical liquidation of millions of kulaks was an immoral monstrosity, which was initiating a vicious circle of compulsion and violence that was bound to engulf the society as a whole and to discredit communism. Perhaps even more damaging from the Soviet point of view have been the more recent observations of the otherwise orthodox and highly pro-Soviet Polish communist leader Władysław Gomulka. Speaking on November the 23rd, 1961, he similarly labeled collectivization, quote, as the beginning of the process of growing lawlessness, a violation of socialist legality, the establishment of an atmosphere of fear, and the growth under these conditions of the personality cult, the cult of Stalin. There's a little footnote here as well. Well, it's a little footnote, it's actually a massive footnote. Down here at the bottom, whether collectivization facilitated rapid industrialization is a matter of debate among the economists. It is indisputable, however, that its extraordinarily brutal character precipitated a rapid decline in agricultural resources that might have contributed to investment. Quote, the gross output of agriculture fell from 124 in 1928 to 101 in 1933, and was only 109 in 1936, while that of cattle farming declined from 137 in 1928 to 65 in 1933, and then rose slowly to 96 in 1936. Throughout the 1930s, the grain crops did not exceed the pre-1913 level, or were somewhat below it. A specialist in Soviet agriculture, in reviewing the recent Soviet reconsideration of that difficult period, reached the conclusion that, quote, with larger grain and currency reserves and the existence of a more effective socialized sector, the government's freedom to maneuver would have been considerably greater. The entire edifice of the industrialization program need not have collapsed, and it would have been possible to avoid the catastrophic decline in livestock herds, the necessity of devoting huge amounts of scarce capital to the task of merely replacing the loss of draft power, and the tying up of much scarce administrative talent in the apparatus of control and compulsion. Whether the Soviet government would have been able to remain in power without the mass collectivization of 1929 to 1930 is a problem in which an economist, qua economist, does not have much to say, but he is entitled to think that a non-Stalinist Soviet government might well have been able to do so. That's from J.F. Carr's Thoughts on the Grain Problem, Soviet Studies, April 1967. Thus, although the marketable share of agriculture might or might not be smaller in a non-collectivized setting, it's reasonably safe to assume that even a smaller share of a larger total output would mean a larger supply in absolute terms. So a lot of questions really about whether or not this whole collectivization thing had any positive effect whatsoever. It's kind of, I don't know, it seems to me kind of cold to be analyzing it and thinking and sort of assessing it and asking these kind of questions in these terms when so many people died. The fact that so many people died should on its own be enough to tell you that the whole system was bad and rotten and terrible and evil. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. This seems to me the mindset of, like, as I've said before on the channel, these systems, these isms, I think are experiments, and they'll roll one out in a certain place and they'll sort of see how that goes and how the people fall in line and what productivity levels they can get out of them. And, you know, if a couple of million die or starve or whatever, then they'll be like, oh, well, okay, that's not ideal. You know, that just goes into their assessment of the system and whether or not they need to tweak certain things. It's like a cold, calculating, evil way of looking at what happened, I feel. But I suppose that's where you got to be to get recruited by David Rockefeller to start a think tank. Very cold, very removed from the suffering, and just sort of trying to assess it, make these assessments in these economic terms. I don't know. It seems strange to me. I can't quite get my head into his frame of mind, but it's probably not too surprising. General Meow Meow says, ever seen the end of the first season of Fallout? It's exactly this corporate plant testing insane ideas of control. Corporate plan testing insane ideas of control. I haven't seen that series. I have played some of the games. I actually played the very earliest Fallout games back before it was 3D, before it was first-person shooter, and they're really good, really funny, witty, challenging, and engrossing. So if you can get your hands on Fallout and Fallout 2, I'd recommend those. But I haven't watched the series, no. I haven't, I'm afraid. So, where do we get to? This bit. It should also be noted that Stalinism put an end to a period of unprecedented creativity in Russian architecture, poetry, and the sciences. During the 1920s, in the immediate post-revolutionary phase, Russia exuded a sense of awakened, vibrant energy. The massive terror and the ideological orthodoxy of Stalinism prompted caution and conformity. Even in the ideological realm, Marxist thought was reduced to an intellectually regressive catechism, for which Stalin's dialectical and historical materialism served as the all-encompassing frame of reference. A different range of issues is posed by the question whether Soviet development, though morally and physically costly, just a bit, right? Oh, it's a bit morally costly. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of language. It should be like, though completely evil, psychopathic, and despicable. There's a word. It's a bit morally costly. Attained goals. See what I mean? Like asking this kind of question. He's like, okay, it was a bit morally costly, but did Soviet development attain goals unmatched by any other society? Oh, yes, let's ask this question. See what I mean? This is a psychopath talking here. It really is. This, of course, has special relevance not only to the internal historical legitimacy of the present system, but particularly to its standing as a model for other societies. Can you imagine assessing the suitability of communism as a model for other societies, like with a straight face, given what happened? It just beggars belief. This claim has been disputed by some Eastern European economic historians as well as by those in the West. Among the Westerners, Walt Rostow has developed perhaps the most pointed and controversial challenge to Stalinist achievements in modernization. He argues that the communists inherited an economy that had taken off in industrial development in the 2 decades prior to World War I, and that Stalin was the architect not of the modernization of a backward country, but of the completion of its modernization. Well, that's an interesting idea, isn't it? This Walt Rostow guy. He's saying, well, it was already like the foundation was done. The stage had been set for modernization under the Russian Tsars and the royal family. I hadn't heard of that before. That guy might be looking up if there's a book or a footnote. There is, number 6. Walt Rostow. Moreover, he sees striking parallels in the pattern and pace of both American and Russian industrialization, the former commencing around the 1860s and the latter in the 1880s. And there's a little footnote here as well. In such areas as... It's not a little one. It's a massive footnote again. These footnotes, like, all that covers 2 pages. This book should probably be twice as thick because of all this tiny text that he squeezes in the bottom of the pages. Like, anyway, let's do it. In such areas as steel, coal, petroleum, and electricity, the overall American rate has been somewhat higher, while in light industry and transportation, the American performance has been spectacularly more impressive. Oh, my bad. That was actually quite a short footnote. It's this one, this little dagger symbol at the end of the page that's going to be the long footnote. So continuing. Similarly, Cyril Black, in his study of Russian modernization, let me move that light a bit, then we're not getting as much glare on the page. Okay. Cyril Black, in his study of Russian modernization, has cited cumulative data showing that in the perspective of 50 years, the comparative ranking of the USSR in composite economic and social indices per capita has probably not changed significantly. So far as the rather limited available evidence permits a judgment, the USSR has not overtaken or surpassed any country on a per capita basis since 1917, with the possible exception of Italy, and the 19 or 20 countries that rank higher than Russia today in this regard also ranked higher in 1900 and 1919. So again, this is kind of reinforcing what I was just saying about how comparing countries and the different systems operating there in terms of economic terms, it's never about health and true health and well-being and quality of life and things that humans like to do and are good at, creative outputs. It's never about that sort of thing. It's always about GDP and money and per capita and resources and debt, and it's always looking at us and our societies through this lens of productivity, because we're farm animals, we're a herd, we're kept as resources, human resources, and what can we produce and how can they manage us to maximize the productivity of this herd of animals that they've decided they're in control of and that they are responsible for managing. So that's what is really coming through to me when I'm hearing this or reading this sort of comparison of, oh, this country ranked higher than this country and everything. This is like psychopaths managing the human herd, comparing notes on which system kind of works the best. But continuing, Black's comparisons include countries that, like the Soviet Union, were badly devastated by wars and had to undergo extensive economic recovery. Other students of comparative socio-economic development have also tried to devise a scheme for ranking countries, and they agree that the Soviet Union today ranks somewhere in the middle 20s. Black is led to the overall conclusion that other societies have achieved similar results at a substantially lower cost. Yeah, because the millions of dead people, it's just a cost, isn't it? It's just a moral cost. Well, it was a bit morally costly, wasn't it, that whole thing? Yeah, for what? You know what I mean? Because I think part of the purpose, the goal was to get rid of all those people. You know, I don't believe in accidents so much. But to hear all that death as just described as morally costly, yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't like it. General Meow Meow is out of here. Have a good evening, and hope you enjoy the replay. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks for all your comments. I'm going to review them a little bit later. Have a good one. Continuing here, Black is led to the overall conclusion that other societies, achieve similar at a lower cost, and thus puts into question a major Soviet premise about its own past. And there's a gigantic footnote here which says, Soviet achievements in space, in weaponry, or in the magnitude of its overall industrial growth have been admirable. Yes. Oh, so admirable. Moreover, the Soviet Union has made impressive strides in education, mass culture, and social services, and it has created a solid and extensive scientific base for the country's further development. Thus, it ranked first among the developed nations in the number of doctors per 100,000 population, and it provided the highest per capita annual social security benefits. At the same time, it is useful to recall that in many respects the Soviet Union is a relatively average society as far as socio-economic development is concerned. The previously cited study by Black provides useful rankings of the Soviet Union in comparison with other states in such fields as education, communications, public health, and so on. In regard to such indicators of modernity as the availability of air communications, radios, telephones, cars, highways, or computers, the Soviet Union was again in the lower ranks of the more developed countries. Thus, when compared with the more developed 21 countries, the Soviet Union ranked 20th in the number of telephones, 7th in the number of radio receivers, and 20th in the number of passenger cars. This is mind-boggling to me. It's so technocratic, isn't it? It's so kind of bureaucratic, and it's like the mind of a control freak. Not saying Brzezinski, but that he's writing in 1970 and telling you the kind of data that is being kept, the level of the data and the information that is being kept, monitored, so that the system can be tweaked a little bit here and altered a little bit there. And all the while, control is maintained, people are dominated, the money flows in the same direction it always goes. And this is what it's all about. It's managing these systems of control. That's the ancient science that I think Alan Watt refers to so often in his talks. This ancient science of managing huge populations of people and keeping them in the system, going round and round, never really knowing that there's another way, never realizing that they're just a herd, just a flock, like sheep or cows or cattle. Then some of these kind of psychopathic analysts come along and they start crunching the numbers, and like the humanity is gone. The society, the people, the relationships, the families, the communities, the fears and dreams and hopes and talents and creative aspirations, none of that. It's like, how many telephones did they have? Oh, yeah, okay. And then how many people died to get them to that point? Oh, right, okay. This was a bit morally costly, wasn't it? But at least they got some telephones and they went to space, so we'll give them a C-. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's creepy. I find it creepy. I'm not going to read the rest of this massive footnote. Let's carry on with the text. Support for these generalizations has also come from a comparative study of growth in steel production as the key aspect of the industrialization process. It should be noted that Soviet economists, as well as political leaders, have frequently relied on steel as the major indicator of Soviet industrial growth. The author of this study, Stefan Kurowski, writing in Communist Poland, offers extraordinarily detailed comparisons showing that under Stalin, Soviet steel production did not increase at a significantly faster pace than during the more rapid phase of the pre-World War I Russian industrialization, and that these rates approximated those attained by other countries, particularly Japan, during their corresponding phases of rapid industrialization. There is a little footnote here. we'll give it a go. Kurowski shows by projecting rates based on those from 1870 that Russian steel production would have grown between 1914 and 1920 to 11 million tons. In 1929, Soviet steel production had only reached the 1914 level, and by 1935, after Stalin's first 5-year plan and the 6 years equivalent to those that separate 1914 from 1920, it reached 12.6 million. Moreover, Kurowski compares Soviet and Japanese growth rates during both the 1928 to 1940 and the 1950 to 1962 periods in great detail. Again, he demonstrates striking regularities in rates of growth. So, continuing with the text. More generally, relying on a more extensive comparative analysis that involves some dozen countries over the period 1780 to 1970, Kurowski argues that socio-political systems have relatively little to do with the acceleration in the production of steel and iron, and that in the acceleration of production there is a pattern of uniformity due to technical innovation. This conclusion quite naturally provoked official ire, for it touched upon the key issue in the Soviet past. Yes, don't talk about the Soviet past. Don't talk about the moral cost. Frank says, when I started work with a major engineering transport firm in Ireland, we had a personnel department. 10 years later, we had a human resources department. LJ says she remembers that change as well. Frank says, yep, what can one say? The longer you live, the more you eat. Yeah. We are human resources now. We're not people or human beings or human doings. We are human resources. And what do you do with a resource? You use it. Use it up. You manage it. You spend it. Yeah, to me, this, I don't know. I find this kind of like economic analysis of, with all the facts and figures, and they produced so much steel and they made this, put this many telephones, like, are really, really dull and dry and not that interesting. But I suppose it's interesting to a technocratic, psychopathic control freak. Well, so I suppose that's good. That means I'm not one of those. So that's nice. The next section is imperial pacification. Yet, though Stalinism may have been a needless tragedy for both the Russian people and communism as an ideal, there is the intellectually tantalizing possibility that for the world at large, it was, as we shall see, a blessing in disguise. Right, okay. Was it? Was it really? So, what was it? How many million deaths was actually a blessing in disguise? Okay. As the state possessing the largest and richest landmass, inhabited by pliant yet very creative people, as the carrier of a strong imperial tradition, as a society skilled in warfare and statecraft, with or without Stalin, the USSR was destined to emerge in the front ranks of world powers, with only another continental power, the United States, as its peer. It's thus highly unlikely, given Russia's traditions and the ambitions, that the availability of power inescapably stimulate... Right, let me redo that bit. It is thus highly unlikely, given Russia's traditions and the ambitions that the availability of power inescapably stimulate, that post-World War I Russia would have long remained stagnant, mired in a morass of inefficiency. Right, okay. But didn't they just say, like in that last chapter, someone analyzed it and found that the rate of industrialization post World War I was as good, at least as good as, if not better than the rate of industrialization under Stalin and the communists? I'm sure that's literally what we just read, wasn't it? Frank Lennon says it's a bit like geoengineering, a blessing in disguise. Fantastic. I wish I could do that thing that some streamers do where they click a comment and it appears on the screen. But I can't do that, I'm afraid. But I'll read it out, that's the next best thing. So, this Stalinism, it's a blessing in disguise because Russia would have been stagnant and inefficient if it hadn't happened. Right. The question that therefore arises is what kind of Russia might otherwise have emerged. A democratic Russia, either liberal or socialist, does not seem to have been a real alternative. It would have required an unprecedented leap from autocracy to democracy without an intervening period of democratic gestation, and in a setting of enormous social deprivation, dislocation, and confusion. It's difficult to see how post-World War One, but it's funny that, isn't it? Because the Fabian socialists were interested in Russia and they were visiting, going over there. And it's funny that they didn't put as much effort over there. Because in the end, I remember at Fabian Freeway, we learned that the Fabian socialists in the end started working under the banner of democracy, doing exactly the same work with the same goals in mind, the same pushing of socialism in order to eventually bring in communism. But they realized that because socialism and communism were linked, because communism killed all these people and people knew about it, they were like, we're going to have to rebrand ourselves. And they started working under the banner of democracy. And like, what even is democracy anyway, really? It's like this is the same system, only you get to vote, put a tick in a box every 4 years, or an X in a box. I don't know. It's probably an X, isn't it? X marks the spot and all that. So, but it's the same system otherwise. It's just that you get to, there's this like very thin, it's not even an illusion. It's like a thin pretense draped over it. Like, this is participatory and you're in control and you're being represented. So it would have been easy to just roll the same thing out in there and call it a democracy. And the only thing that was different was, you just let them vote every so often and do exactly the same thing to them that you would do in an autocratic system or in, what was the other word they used here? A bit of an itchy head today. So yeah, I don't know. To me, this is framing I suppose the dialectic, as Mindhack said earlier. This is kind of like reinforcing that dialectic. Like, the democratic system is such a different thing over here. It's so different to the autocratic way, the fascist sort of communist way over here. It's like, by and large, they're the same system. There's a banking cabal. There's usury. There's enslaving the population through debt. There's schooling, the corporate control of various aspects of the society. So there isn't that much difference between them, is what I'm saying. And but I think part of Brzezinski's part of the illusion that he's weaving and the magic that he's casting. Don't forget, we got this demonic sigil on the front of the book here. Is to kind of reinforce some of these like bunk dialectics that people get trapped in. So that's what I have to say about that. A democratic Russia. Let's go back to this. We'll redo this sentence. It would have required an unprecedented leap from autocracy to democracy without an intervening period of democratic gestation, and in a setting of enormous social deprivation, dislocation, and confusion. It is difficult to see how post-World War I Russia, torn by national dissension, class conflicts, competing ideological appeals, and sheer physical misery, could have effectively institutionalized a democratic system. So it's funny that this kind of language and this way of talking about countries always bugs me a little bit. It's difficult to see how post-World War I Russia could have effectively institutionalized a democratic system. Well, it isn't like a country doesn't institutionalize a system, does it? What do you mean by a country? Are you talking about everybody who lives there? Or are you talking about the ruling elite of that place? Or are you talking about some other abstract entity and ascribing it autonomy and agency in the world? Because I think they do this a lot to obscure the way things really work. The way things really work is some dominant minority comes along and says, right, this is the system we're going to roll out in this place, and they draft up the plans and then they pay a bunch of people to advertise it and teach it and spread it around. And then they roll the system out. It's not that Russia, the whole of Russia, or just Russia as a country, just decides to become democratic. Do you know what I mean? I don't even know what I mean. So if you know what I mean, then well done. But it's just that it's this hiding of the occulting and the way things really work, and using this kind of language. Like, what does that even mean? It's difficult to see how Russia could have effectively institutionalized a democratic system. Like, who are you talking about? And I think it's done on purpose. I'm just being picky, probably, but it does feel annoying to me because it's not the people of a country who, you know, the peasants, the kulaks, it's not them who decide the political system that they're under. Because these revolutions are always led, they're always planned in advance, and they're always hijacked and taken over. And if you actually left it to the people, they'd say, we don't want any rulers or any governments, thank you very much. We just want to produce for ourselves and live in our little communities and be left alone for the most part. And then it's only through the conditioning and the mind control and the scientific manipulation of people's minds and their belief systems and their ideologies, and then the dialectics of playing one group off against another group and then saying, look, you need a police force because otherwise that group will be killing that group, and you need a government because otherwise who would make sure the roads get built and other such ridiculous arguments. But then when they talk about it in these kinds of elite texts, it's always like, oh, Russia or Great Britain or USA, like it's some entity that has its own personality and goals and dreams and aspirations and an agency in the world. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of disingenuous, or maybe it's sophistry. That might be a good word for it. It's kind of a bit sophistic. That's not the right word, is it? It's sophistry. But anyway, let me try and finish that sentence. It's difficult to see how Russia could have effectively institutionalized a democratic system when such systems have failed in countries endowed with stronger democratic traditions and functioning under circumstances much more propitious to democratic growth. Given the massive political awakening of the Russian people that had been stimulated by the industrialization of the preceding decades, the beginnings of literacy, and by the experiences of the war, the only other alternative appears to have been an openly chauvinist and intensely imperialist dictatorial regime. When linked with economic expansion, similar phrases in the political development of other great nations, Germany, Japan, the United States, resulted in aggressive, dynamic imperialism. Expansive nationalism provided the basis for popular mobilization and for a highly assertive, even aggressive foreign policy. At the very least, Russia, in all probability, aided by foreign investments, economic investment in states that subsequently became political enemies, was characteristic of the capitalist era. That's here's the quite the famous footnote here that we will read out. It says, for impressive evidence of Western participation in the early phase of Soviet economic growth, see Anthony C. Sutton's Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development, which argues that Soviet economic development for 1917 to 1930 was essentially dependent on Western technological aid, and that at least 95% of the industrial structure received this assistance. Right? So that's a little surprising. I remember hearing Jay Dyer and Richard Grove talking about that footnote, because it's surprising because Anthony Sutton received a lot of grief for his studies and things he turned up in his books and talked about and wrote about. He did the Wall Street trilogy, Wall Street and Hitler, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and I think the third one is Wall Street and FDR. Yeah. And then he also did this series, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development. It's quite pricey. Hard to find the early, original copies of it now. I don't know if there's reprints available. But it's a good example of how the people who dismiss these kinds of topics as conspiracy theory clearly aren't looking at the evidence because the evidence is being provided by the people doing it and who have the plans in their books, but also by scholars such as Anthony C. Sutton, who is then referenced by Zbigniew Brzezinski himself, the think tank founder and national security advisor to Carter. So there are people out there who study this stuff rigorously and write sourced, well-referenced academic books about these things. And that's what will reveal, for example, this cooperation between the East and the West. Because that kind of information, knowing that the West was pumping technology into Russia, and then 50 years later, you're in the Cold War, and suddenly these are your enemies, right? And like, oh, the Russia, and even now, like in 2025, Russia's the enemy, and they hate us, they want to kill us. It's like, and we were cooperating and supporting them to industrialize and exporting. I say we, obviously I had nothing to do with it, but it just shows you that things are more nuanced than the good guys versus bad guys narrative that you get in the mainstream news, and that whips you up into your tax-paying frenzy where you're glad that your money is being siphoned out of your bank account and sent overseas to help some little comedian fight off the greatest threat to the West that's ever existed. You know, the storylines and the narratives are kind of ridiculous when you start to actually think about them, but most people don't think, so that's the problem. But yeah, quite an infamous reference there. Brzezinski referencing Anthony C. Sutton, and then Anthony C. Sutton working with, for example, Patrick Wood. They did the book relevant to this conversation, Trilaterals over Washington. Of course, trilaterals being a reference to the Trilateral Commission, which is set up by Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Patrick Wood did some fantastic work on technocracy, but then he worked with Anthony Sutton on this book, which is about the Trilateral Commission and its influence. So interesting that Zbigniew Brzezinski is referencing Anthony Sutton, and then Anthony Sutton ends up going on to write this book about how the trilaterals are pulling the strings on certain things. But yeah, that's a pretty important and interesting footnote to find. But let's continue. Led by a modernizing chauvinistic dictatorship, yes. Let's go back a little bit. At the very least, Russia, in all probability aided by foreign investments, led by a modernizing chauvinist dictatorship, might have experienced a burst of imperialist nationalist energy that would have also made it a world power, perhaps both at lower domestic cost and in a fashion more threatening to the world. There they are talking about human lives as just a cost again. This point deserves some elaboration. Stalin consummated the marriage of Marxism, Leninism, and Soviet, particularly Russian, nationalism. The increasing stress on great Russian state traditions, on frontiers, on national aspirations, on Russia's civilizing missions vis-à-vis the non-Russian Soviet nations, and the like, went hand in hand with the physical transformation of the Soviet Communist Party from one dominated by a rather mixed lot of cosmopolitan and internationally oriented intellectuals of Russian, Jewish, Polish, Baltic, and Caucasian origin, into a party dominated primarily by Russian and to some extent Ukrainian peasants turned party apparatchiki. To these men, the Soviet political system simultaneously represented the source of their own social advancement and of their political power. Their loyalty to the system was not unlike that of many peasant priests, usually the youngest sons for whom no land was left, to the Catholic Church in traditional societies. It was more institutional than intellectual. Ideology provided the integrative intellectual perspective, but it was not the principal source of motivation and commitment, as it had been to the international-minded intelligentsia who preceded them. Accordingly, the new Soviet elite tended to be both conservative and nationalist, even when they sincerely believed themselves to be the advocates of an internationalist ideology. They could thus act in a manner essentially dictated by their own interests and nevertheless consider themselves true internationalists. To them, Stalin's famous dictum that the test of a true internationalist is his loyalty to the Soviet Union was the ideal resolution of the tension that developed between Soviet nationalism and communist internationalism. No wonder that Brezhnev, in effect, revived the dictum in 1968 to explain the occupation of Czechoslovakia. The cumulative result of this situation has been a pattern of mixed motivation and behavior, dominated since Stalin by state considerations that often cynically exploit the ethical universalism of Marxism. But the latter has also had to be kept alive, if only because it mobilized foreign sympathy for the Soviet Union and because it tapped the idealism of Soviet youth, making it easier for the regime to recruit adherents. Though the Soviet Union did exploit its Eastern European vassals, and though its financial and technical aid to China was not politically disinterested, the Soviet people genuinely believe, as they occasionally grumble to visitors, that the Soviet Union has aided both Eastern Europe and China as part of its obligation to communist solidarity. Moreover, the internal violence employed by Stalin and the educational effect of the communist ideology, even if initially not accepted by the masses, had a restraining effect on unbridled nationalism. At first, both Stalinist terror and ideologically induced social changes perplexed and often alienated the people. The unprecedented 1936-1938 massacre of the top Soviet political, economic, military, and intellectual leadership inevitably reduced the vitality of Soviet society. Literally several 100,000 of the most talented and best-trained people perished during those years. In addition, though the principle of internationalism was often violated in practice, it did restrain the inclination toward great Russian nationalism, if only by forcing more covert behavior. Domestically, that principle helped to preserve non-Russian nationalities, despite Stalin's purges of their intelligentsia. Internationally, it helped to shape in Soviet leaders a state of mind that worked against the incorporation into the Soviet Union of Poland, Finland, and perhaps even other Eastern European states. At one point, the Yugoslavs themselves volunteered for membership in the Soviet Union, and some Slovak communists, including Gustav Husak, proposed the same for Slovakia. This is a temptation that more traditionally nationalist and pan-Slav Russian leaders might have found difficult to resist. Paradoxically, therefore, though Soviet ideology has subsequently been reinforced and perhaps even increasingly dominated by the nationalism of the masses, particularly since World War II, the historical function of Stalinist communism may have been to restrain and redefine a phase in which the Russian people went through an intense nationalist, even imperialist awakening. It forced that new mass nationalism to pay at least lip service to international cooperation, equality of all peoples, and the rejection of racism. Marxism not only provided Russia with a global revolutionary doctrine, but infused it with a universal perspective derived from ethical concerns, not unlike those stimulated in the West by the religious and liberal traditions. Global revolutionary doctrine and a universal perspective. That's it, isn't it? That's what Marxism's purpose is. It's to lay the prep the soil for the the first global revolution and the universal scientific humanism of the UN and UNESCO, as we are all going to be living under very soon. Despite its monumental achievements, Stalinism sapped the human and emotional resources of the Russians, and a post-Stalin Russia may therefore eventually enter into the world community as another spent post-imperial power. Finally, by creating a particularly despotic model of communism and by insisting that all other communist parties submit to it, Stalin not only set in motion the process of fragmenting communism, but also vitiated much of communism's appeal at a time when the susceptibility of the more advanced West The area originally seen by Marx as ripest for the historical transformation might have made communism the truly dominant and vital force of our time. I'm going to leave it there, I think, for tonight's reading. The next section is going to be the bureaucratization of boredom, which is a great title. And we got sections on the innovative relationship, defensive orthodoxy, what else? And perspective on tomorrow. But quite an interesting chapter, I think you will agree. Or maybe you wouldn't, I don't know. If you're still here, then I think you would agree. If you don't think this is interesting, then I don't think you'll still be here right now. Okay, I'm going to have a swig, and then we'll do some final thoughts. So, I'm just scrolling back up the chat to catch some of these. Oh, there's been quite a lot of quotes. Am I going to be able... General Meow Meow was saying they've expressed they love the Chinese model of control, but even the Chinese can't get it all together. What a mess. China just incentivizes harder criminals because of the punishments. General Meow Meow again says, was all that killing in Russia then just a trauma method to impose communism and mind control? The thought just occurred to me. Been hearing a lot about how mind control works. Certainly, if you break people down, I remember Huxley talking about this in Brave New World Revisited, I think. I think it was that book. And he talks about how, they've worked out how much pain and suffering somebody can endure. And on the upper end, it's still not very long. It's only like 3 weeks or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, when you do that to a people, you affect everybody. Everybody will know somebody who's died or starved, and it's a horrific thing to do to human beings. But it was done deliberately and on purpose by design. And I think it's kind of despicable that Brzezinski's talking about, it's a bit morally costly. I really can't get on board with that cold way of analyzing this sort of thing. Celine Lyon says public health, bit of an oxymoron. Yeah, it's the health of the public is just the health of the individuals in the public who make up the public. But again, it's like you have to take the experimental injection because of public health. It's like, wait, I am part of the public. There's a real there's a bit of a contradiction in there somewhere that's kind of hard to separate. Frank Lennon said, permeating as a democratic chameleon. Yeah, permeating was the method of the Fabian socialists. They preferred permeating and then working for change from within. Celine Lyon says, what used to be called the mafia is now referred to as philanthropy. The spells are in the spelling. Nice. LJ saw a book ages ago on the words we use in spells. It looks interesting. I must try and find it. Please do. I think it would be very good to have a book on that. Bai in the chat today told us about a book he recently ordered, which was about the names of people and places. That looked quite interesting. That was on the Hayes Reviews chat on Telegram. But words are, it's not an accident, the language we've been given. It's like a number one form of mind control and just population control, because if they control the language, they control your thought and the quality of your thought and the things you can think about. And if you don't have words for certain things, then you can't think about them, or it's much harder to think about them anyway. The Mansion says, where can we get this book? Good question. It depends if you want a physical copy or an electronic copy. You can get an electronic copy from Internet Archive. I think it's even linked on the Wikipedia page for Zbigniew Brzezinski, I'm pretty sure. I'll just double check and confirm that. And what I'll do is we can check it together. So here's Zbignew's wiki page. If you go down on the left here to further reading, then you can see where is it? Oh, maybe not. For some reason, I thought it was here. These books are not Brzezinski's books. Maybe we go for citations. Look for these PDFs. We could just do a Control F, can't we? We'll go Control F between. No, I can't seem to do it. Oh, there we go. Between two ages. It's not coming up. I don't know. Oh, there. Oh, okay. It's catching up. Boom. There it is. Got it. It's under. Oh, it's under works. Yeah. So you go to the Wikipedia page. You go to this section. I don't know why my Wikipedia is lagging something rotten now. So everything went smooth pretty much for tonight's broadcast until the bit when I wanted to access Wikipedia to show you where to get a copy of the book. Page unresponsive. No, don't tell them where to get the book so they can read it for themselves and make their own mind up. You're supposed to tell your audience what to think. Oh, it's there anyway. It's right there at the bottom. You can see there's a PDF. Click that. Download yourself a copy. Otherwise, the only other option you've got is to buy a physical copy, and they ain't cheap. But I haven't looked for a while what kind of price you're talking. So let's have a look. I'm just going to check eBay. Looking at like for a hard copy, £60, £70. Oh, goodness me, look at this. I've got to show you this. So here's a copy. This is exactly the copy that we're reading from. Exactly the edition we're reading from. $395. Bargain. Bargain. But there's other copies that aren't that expensive. These ones are these hardback copies. They don't show a picture of it, but they're cheaper. Still a total rip-off, though. 50, 70, 60, 70 quid. It's crazy. But yeah, if you want to get a copy of this exact one that we're reading from, that I'm marking up with pencil and scribbling in, and I even damaged it on the side there at the bottom. There's a sticker on it that I pulled off on it. Yeah, you're looking at a cool 300 or 400 quid. But yeah, Frank Lennon says Internet Archive, you can get a copy of the book. That's probably your best bet. If you're still here, the mansion. I don't think I've seen you on the stream before, so thank you for joining and asking a question. I appreciate that. Celine Lyon says, YouTube, you give us crowns and emojis. So glad you encourage discernment. Yeah, the crowns, I can't turn it off. I'm sorry about that. LJ says, we had that discussion with Nick a little while ago. Not sure if we found out what they mean. The crowns, it's you're rated according to how much you like the stream. So I think it's to do with how many comments you post. So if you post a lot of comments, then you get the highest number on the crown. You're number one. I don't know. I think that's what it is. ESP says, it was interesting but difficult going for me. Me too. Yeah, that was difficult going, that one. There's so much in this book. I would need multiple reads or maybe to listen back to myself reading it to pick up some of the broader points. It's also things I don't know a whole lot about. You know, I'm not well up on the Leninism, Stalinism, and Marxism and all that stuff. Probably best off just reading Animal Farm. That's probably your best place to learn about it, that whole event. So, yes, I agree. It is difficult going, but thank you for hanging in there, and hopefully you gleaned something of value and use during the reading. Frank Lennon says, no question, old Brez was talking up communism. Good section. Thank you. You're very welcome. Of course. Yeah, he is doing that a little bit, isn't he? He's sort of like, yes, well, you know, a few million did die, but look at all the good things that came out of it. More telephones. More steel. AD, very insightful section indeed. I'm glad you think so. Yes, I thought so too. And The Mansion sends a little heart emoji. Thank you for that. I would like to send you one back. I'll just do some hearts in the chat this way. There you go. I'll do the old school heart. You know, the little arrow and a 3. That's the way they used to do it back in the day before emoji. LJ says, really, YouTube? Do we need crown rewards? Not on this channel, we don't. I agree. It's frustrating to me, but it's called gamification. And even my online community on the school platform has the same thing. And it's basically getting you used to the social the social credit score, wherein every action you take will have some sort of point association to it, and your points will either go up, pushing your score up, or it'll go down. And these are just nudges to get people used to that. So let's say you drive through a yellow light instead of stopping, right? You know, we all do that. We're like, oh, we can get through it before it turns to red, right? Put the foot down and get through the yellow light. You know, you get a little score or a point or it'll get tagged that you did that, and it'll feed into some sort of rating system. Because they talk about having this in China already, where they name and shame people up on big screens, and they show your picture, and they say like, oh, don't associate with this person. They're a bad person. They didn't pay their taxes, or they badmouthed the Communist Party on online, or they did jaywalking or something like that. So that's really what it's all about. It's just getting people used to being constantly rated and scored, and there's this undercurrent of competition, of trying to outdo other people and fall and be better behaved. There's this whole system where I work. It's called impressions. And when you work with someone, you can leave them an impression, and it's some words about what it was like to work with them, and then the more of these impressions that you can get off people, then the higher the likelihood that you'll get a pay rise or a promotion. So it's all like, it's best exemplified in the Black Mirror episode Nosedive, and everyone's walking around all the time carrying their phones, and they're like, hello, nice to meet you, how are you doing today, are you okay? And they're smiling, and they go, yes, I'm very well, thank you. And they're kind of like manically rating each other, swiping up on their phones, giving each other positive ratings and interactions, but being like overly fake happy and polite and friendly because they're so like worried, and like, oh yeah, it's great to see you today, how are you? Oh yeah, and it's really, really creepy. But that's basically what it's all about, is gamifying people to be constantly competing for points that you'll get for behaving correctly and thinking correctly and speaking correctly and all that other stuff, right? So yeah, that's what I think it's about anyway. That's my theory behind it. LJ says, I love your cozy library corner, Nick. So do I. This is my favorite place in the house by far, apart from my bed. I need to get some better lighting though, because it's all kind of shadowy. You can sort of see the shadow of my behind me there, and the only light I have for the shelving is down on the floor, which is why you get, it doesn't properly illuminate all the books. But that's just one of those things that I'll maybe update and invest in some proper lights at some point, maybe. But for now, I think you can see me, and you can hear me all right, and you can see the book, and that's the important thing. CTTM Melissa on Odyssey says, Frank always makes me laugh, and excellent points you're making about what people want vis-a-vis being governed. Thank you. I'm not sure if you are behind. Yeah, so on Odyssey, you're still way behind. If you look at the stream on Odyssey, I'll show you that this is what's going on. For those who are like, I'll show you what's going on. So if you go to Odyssey right now, I'm still on page 137. Look, as you can see. Which is kind of frustrating to me. That and it's doing this. It's constantly buffering in this way, and then it's choppy and kind of jerky. And it means that when I shut down the stream, I have to sit here until this catches up, or I then have to, or I can shut it down and upload a replay, which is a bit of a faff. But yeah, Odyssey's not doing very well. It's kind of the worst out of the three at the moment, which is a shame because I always wanted to love Odyssey and push it above YouTube and Rumble as a more of a better technology and a more of a free speech kind of platform. But yeah, Melissa's comment that I'm making excellent points 5 minutes ago was way, way back in the stream at this point. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to fix. And I hopefully, I emailed the Odyssey people and I said, I'm streaming now. Have a look at what's happening. So hopefully they'll be onto it and they'll come up with some sort of suggestion as to what I can do. Because I did the things they already suggested and it didn't help. So I think that is about it for tonight's stream. We are on the hour and a half mark now. So thank you very much for hanging out with me this evening. We're now on page 138 out of 309, wasn't it? So we've still got quite a ways to go. Still got 160 pages ahead. We're going to plow on. I've realized I think part of the reason the progress is so slow is because of these massive footnotes at the bottom of the page. It's like, look how much text that adds. Those big footnotes there and the tiny writing. I mean, if you added all that in, I'm sure this book would be twice as long. So it's deceptively long with all those footnotes. But yes, another good section. I think he is talking up communism. He is trying to give you that dispassionate view of systems and isms so that you are dehumanizing the people who have to live under these systems and looking instead at the metrics by which they view whether or not a system is successful. By metrics, I mean how much steel did they produce and how many telephones did they put in people's homes and all this other kind of silly stuff. It's cold, it's calculating, it's psychopathic, but it's an insight into the mindset of these types of predatory, technocratic control freaks. And so for that reason alone, I think that section was extremely valuable. I don't have too much to comment on the actual content of the things he's saying regarding Leninism and Marxism, and because I don't know, I'm not deeply aware of that history. Although I do think it's worth mentioning and reminding people that Anthony C. Sutton did excellent work that is well regarded on the links between Wall Street and the Bolsheviks, as well as the other books of mentioned by Brzezinski about the technological transfer from the West to the Soviets. So it is not an us and them, good guys, bad guys, Cold War scenario. Really, the elites at the top will work with anybody. As Quigley says, they don't have a problem working with anybody. Communists, capitalists, if it serves their goals and their agenda, they will cooperate and collaborate. And they will send the money to the right places. They will get the support. They will provide the support if they have it. And communism and socialism and the Fabians and Marx and the rest of them, they were all put there for a purpose. And I think it all panned out as it was supposed to, as it was planned. And I think Brzezinski's kind of running cover, as I've said many times, for the planning and the planners and the world controllers. And he's trying to spin the narrative that these isms just have minds of their own and the countries have agency and just make decisions, and that there isn't some sort of tiny dominant parasitic cabal of elite scientists who know how to manage large populations of people and do it very expertly for hundreds or thousands of years. That's the bit that he's leaving out and that he will never say. So, hope you enjoyed tonight's reading. It was lovely to have you here. Tammy and The Mansion and LJ, ESP, Matsy11A. Good to have you here. And everybody else, ESP. I think I just said ESP, didn't I? Yeah. There, you get 2 mentions. Frank, AD, and everybody on Rumble. We got Turbs. And on Odyssey, we got Melissa CTTM. Lovely indeed to spend Friday nights with you. Don't forget, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews if you want to support in any way, or if you want to sign up to my socials, or have a look at Continuity of Control, the email series or join the book club where we meet on Wednesdays. We've got a really nice group of people. We get together. We just talk about whatever's on our mind. We swap book recommendations, but we talk about other broader topics as well, preparation, what people are doing. We've got a nice international community in there now, actually. It's really good. And so we update each other, keep each other accountable. And, it's good to meet people with a like mind and a similar worldview because they can be hard to find. And while we've got the technology to be able to connect, that's a good way to do it. So we do that every Wednesday. I'm thinking about putting another day on the calendar as well, maybe alternating Wednesdays and Tuesdays so that people can come to one or the other if they're busy. And then replays as well. If you pay to join the book club, you can get all the replays and see Surveillance Valley, which is an essential bit of information about how the internet was a counterinsurgency technology from the beginning. It was always planned to be rolled out for the purposes of surveillance and control. That's well documented in the Surveillance Valley book. And then also the 4 arguments for the elimination of television is just an amazing assessment of screens and screen use, even though he focuses on television because that was really the main device that had a screen that was around at the time he was writing. It's applicable to all screens. And so that's an excellent book as well. Some really key things to bear in mind when you're interacting with screens and thinking about purchasing your next Ultra HD curved 60-inch smart TV for your house. Maybe you should buy a copy of Zbigniew Brzezinski's book instead. So, that's all I got to say. Lovely to spend this time with you. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a fantastic week. I will see you on the next one. And unless I see you before in the Telegram group chat, perhaps, or maybe in the book club, I'll see you on Wednesday. But for everybody else, I'll see you next Friday when we'll be continuing with Between Two Ages. So thank you for hanging out. Good night. God bless.